I thought it was like 6 weeks. Not that I don't have the crystal ball or anything, but I still think that there's no reason why this hasn't already happened. I think it's imminent that somebody puts these pieces together to execute a large scale attack. I'm waiting for the New York Times headline that says 10% of all American companies with a website have been pwned by a single actor.
What is up, everybody? Welcome back to AI Unchained. This is episode 3. We are diving into the dark side of AI with Alex Lewin. This started with a conversation at Bitcoin 2023 with a number of people who are diving down the AI rabbit hole, and particularly someone who has a cybersecurity perspective on this. I had to have, as soon as we started talking, we sat down out in the food court and we just chatted for, 30 minutes or so. And I was like, this has to happen. We have to do this on the show, and we got to talk about the implications here. Because I think people, and he agrees that like people are ignoring this. And because it's uncomfortable, because it's really, really hard to face. And that is the exact wrong approach. And I agree with him. And so I think it is not merely an interesting conversation. It is not merely a fascinating development. It is an important conversation. So that is what we are diving into. Thank you. Do not forget to subscribe to AI Unchained if you want to stay up on this. And we will be covering a lot of videos specifically about how to get into some of these tools, because I've been playing around more and more on running these locally, and I want to be able to do that so I can share that with you guys. So follow this channel if you want to stay up on that. We are going to be covering it all. With that, let's get into today's chat, today's conversation with Alex Lewin on the dark side of AI. All right. Welcome back to AI Unchained. This is episode 3 with Alex Lewin. We are getting into the dark side of AI. What is up, man? Welcome to the show. How you doing?
Hey, guy. Doing well. Excited to talk to you.
Yeah, man. So we had a really interesting conversation. So Ben actually got us in touch at Bitcoin 2023 because he and I were actually had gone down the night before, gone down this rabbit hole talking about, the good, the bad, the everything in between of AI. And apparently he bumped into, did you all know each other beforehand?
Yeah, we work together.
Oh, okay. Shit. But he immediately was like, "Oh my God, Alex, you got to talk to Alex. You're gonna, you're gonna love-hate this conversation really bad."
Sorry.
So, well, I'm glad he connected us, very much so, because it's gotten me going down like a thought process on trying to unravel what the consequences of all of this are going to be, and what things are going to look like at the other side of 3 to 5 years. Because regardless, I think, and I assume that you would completely agree, that things are going to be very, very, very different than what they are now.
Yeah.
So maybe, how about just start off by telling me who you are, what do you do? Because we only very briefly got into that, and what kind of got you attached to this to the point that like you've just consumed a lot of your time in going down this thread.
Yeah, sure thing. So my name's Alex. I'm a software engineer. I work on Lightning at a company called Block Spaces. But recently, as a hobby, I've been diving into the world of the open source development of tools using large language models, and specifically from the lens of cybersecurity and offensive security. So in college, I was studying cybersecurity, and I thought I was going to go into cybersecurity, and then switched over to like just generic software engineering. But I've kind of retained that, I don't know, that like gene of looking at stuff from a how to break it for first lens.
That perspective,
which is definitely helpful developing software. But anywho, so like I'm watching, or I guess sucked into the ChatGPT hype craze like everybody else does. And I find a project called Auto-GPT, and we can talk more about Auto-GPT specifically, but I'm kind of obsessed with the application of Auto-GPT for offensive security. And that's what's been keeping me up at nights for the past month or so. So,
All right. So for offensive security, why don't you, for those in the audience, why don't you give a breakdown of what you mean exactly by those words?
yeah. So, in the cybersecurity world, there's maybe a good way to explain this is there's two teams on every cybersecurity in every cybersecurity department at a company. Um, with just this is a simplification, obviously, but there's basically two teams. There's a red team and a blue team, and it comes from Halo. There's an attack team and a defense team. The red team is plays the role of the malicious hacker, and they try to find the vulnerabilities of the system, and the blue team tries to stop them. And together, the goal is that both teams working cooperatively together, or I guess adversarially together, they create very robust and anti-fragile systems.
Gotcha. Okay.
So
Okay.
offensive security is specifically talking about the red team side, the attackers, and simulating the role of malicious hackers.
All right. Maybe we haven't really dug into. I haven't specifically dug into GPT on this show either. So just in case people are unfamiliar with it, why don't you kind of give me a breakdown of that? And is that open source or is that just a
Yeah, Auto-GPT is completely open source.
interesting?
So
Okay.
yeah, to give some background, if everybody here has listening has definitely tried ChatGPT, um, but if for anybody that's tried it, you know that you're kind of leading this incredibly smart sheep around. You're the shepherd. You have to figure out what you want to prompt out of ChatGPT, and it's similar to working with like a very very junior employee at a company. It's that they're incredibly capable. It can do a lot, but you have to lay out very specifically what you want. And if your instructions aren't clear, then it's going to deviate from the overall mission. It's not able to inherently intuit where you're wanting it to go. You have to tell it exactly where to go. It's getting better at that, but it's for right now it's a very intelligent sheep, and you're leading it around. Um, AutoGPT plays the role of the shepherd and leads ChatGPT around to a higher level goal. So, like, what does that mean? AutoGPT takes a high level goal, breaks it down into steps, and launches individual instances of AutoGPT to accomplish each of those steps. Like the quintessential example of this is like I want is the quintessential prompt that they've been using to explain the project is I want you to do market research. So if you ask ChatGPT to do market research, it's not going to do a very good job. But if you ask AutoGPT to do market research, then it's going to first create a bunch of steps, and it's going to look up what is market research on the internet. So it can access the internet. It pulls down a summary and digests the summary of market research and then it transforms that into like 5 steps. Okay, first I need to look up all of the companies. Let's say I'm doing market research for a shoe company. First, I'm going to look up a list of potential candidate competitors in the shoe industry. I'm going
Yeah.
to collect data on those companies and aggregate them to a table. I'm going to create a bunch of evaluation metrics to compare those different companies, and then I'm going to spit out the results in a nice PDF or something like that.
Gotcha.
Then,
Okay.
in order, it launches a new instance of AutoGPT to accomplish each of those tasks in order.
Yeah. And
So
it will basically take the results. So it's kind of a meta GPT in the fact that it's Chat GPT does certain individual tasks, and this is a way to put those individual tasks together and figure out which tasks need to happen in order to continue an entire process to create a larger task that's actually just a combination of many. Just like how you break down any project, right? You break down into small steps that you can manage. This is the system that breaks it down into steps and figures out what needs to be done, and then Chat GPT or still Auto-GPT, but the normal LLM, the normal language model, does each individual task, and then this one puts them together.
Yeah, precisely. I mean,
Okay.
it's the shepherd guiding the really smart sheep,
Yeah.
and it's spawning more sheep that have specific tasks, and then it aggregates the results into something um, that I mean, you touched on this, it resembles like a manager managing employees.
Yeah.
It's like they have an
So
idea of a high level thing. Yeah, they bring
you
it up into
become the
tasks, and they
owner.
spawn them.
They're
Yeah.
the manager, and now you just tell the manager what to do. We're already past the just like piece by piece telling the employee what to do, and we're to managers. And how quick did this kind of unfold? How quick did, at least in what you had seen, did this move from like, oh yeah, chat GPT to here to, oh, now we have language models to control and build tasks for language models? Like,
Yeah. I mean, when did ChatGPT drop? Like December?
I think that sounds right. I don't know. The
Um,
timelines on all of this stuff is so short.
yeah,
Um,
so Auto-GPT started being worked on around April, and it's really taken
okay.
off like, yeah, early
Have you been using it
mid-April.
a lot personally?
Uh, yeah, like I was obsessed for like 2 weeks when I first found it, and development's been insane. Like the amount of ideas people have, like to make it more, I mean, robust and actually effective. Like for a while, people were pretty bearish on the idea just because it wasn't very performant, but it's
Hmm.
getting better, and now it's
Yeah,
actually
it doesn't take much.
being
Yeah.
able to fulfill what it's promising. Um, but yeah, it's getting insanely complex when people have ideas about how to organize this organization structure and allocate resources to efficiently accomplish high level tasks. Yeah, it's kind of frightening how fast it's growing and how fast
Yeah.
it's going.
Yeah, there's I also saw something that in fact this was like yesterday, it was like last night. It was the first time I came across it. It's so crazy, like I come across things faster than I can actually read what the hell they are. Um but there was one train of thought or something, I think it is. But it's
Hmm.
something, it's kind of like what I got from it was it's kind of like a LoRa for stable diffusion, is that it's this specific modification that gets it to think about all the things that it already knows in like a certain sort of hierarchy, and it's trying to give it reasoning skills. It's trying to
Hmm.
create like a reasoning structure so that it can make sense of like what the best decision is, and like think about like, oh well, this is actually a contradiction. And apparently the results, or at least the little group or whatever, the two responses or whatever, yeah, we're playing around with it, and the results are really incredible so far. So again, like the number of layers we can add to this, because I feel like we've kind of created this simplistic model for the idea of intelligence, or the idea of creating some sort of pattern or skill, some repeatable skill into a piece of software, into an algorithm. And then it's like, oh shit, we can stack these on top of each other. And then it's immediately like boom, 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 like we're aggressively going through. It's very much like creating one piece of software, or one, like the internet. Like, oh, now we can ship data back and forth. It's like, oh wait, we can do media, we can do images, we can do text, we can do email. Like it just,
Yeah,
like we're just like fuck, and it just like blows up and gets so big and complex so
I
fast.
mean, it's not at all dissimilar. Like, okay, it's similar to software, like as you put it, but it's also very similar to like training like a student with like a
A
college
child,
education.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, or like you give them skills, and then you talk
Mm-hmm.
to them, or then you teach them other skills, and then you show how the skills relate, and then sooner or later they're doing incredibly complicated problems that require a variety of skill sets, and orchestrating all of what they know into this cohesive package. Um, and yeah, it's starting to resemble the real world quickly.
Mm. For good or worse, for good or bad. So there's always that risk that your student is, uh, the one that turns into Darth Vader as you teach him the Force, so to speak. Um, and so in that context, you said this is what you were losing sleep over. Is Auto GPT the main tool that you've interacted with that has gotten you concerned about the idea? And this is something we mentioned in yesterday's episode already, or just in passing. It's the idea of AI malware, of language models with the goal of internet destruction, with the goal of getting into every network out there. Why don't you kind of lay out the thesis or the big picture, and maybe also the beginnings of what we have seen in this regard so far?
Yeah, sure thing. So talked about Auto-GPT. The goal is to accomplish high level tasks without having to worry about it. What if the high level task is something malicious? Like the high level task could be, okay, first, a more innocuous one. My high level task is to do a vulnerability assessment on a given server. It's open
Mm-hmm.
to the internet. I want you to do a vulnerability assessment, just as a penetration tester would do. Companies all the time, they hire an individual to basically knock on the door and do a cyber penetration test, which is part of the red team, and give them back a document, like a PDF document of all of the vulnerabilities so that they can fix them. Well, now you can ask a robot to do that. So, okay, I want you to do a penetration test, and also, yeah, this already kind of works with Auto-GPT. You can ask it to do a penetration test. I have a prompt for penetration tester GPT,
Mm-hmm.
and this already works. Take it a step further.
Actually, after the show, if you don't mind sharing that with me, I would love to run this on my local machine and just kind of play around with it myself, especially
Yeah,
if this is going to be the environment we're going into. I would love to penetration test my network.
yeah.
So anyway, sorry to interrupt.
No, all good. Absolutely. Yeah, I have a growing list of scary prompts. Okay, so penetration test or GPT is more innocuous, but take it a step further. What if your high level goal isn't just to do a vulnerability analysis assessment, but I want you to the high level goal could be I want you to perform the vulnerability analysis and now use what you find to execute some attack against the server.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, okay, you start piecing it together. It's like, I want you to find vulnerabilities and then rank order the vulnerabilities that you find in terms of the most effective and highest probability of success to uh, gain privileged access to some server or to pwn a server. And then I want you to execute that vulnerability. And once you're in, I want you to, for example, uh, launch ransomware or find sensitive information on servers and exfiltrate that to a source. Um, and just meddle around. Or I want you to find a vulnerability and then stop the service from, or take the service offline or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so now you have this tool that can do the job of an experienced, highly paid offensive security engineer. Uh, and yeah, okay, that's, you know, there's hackers. Hackers already exist, but what's the
Yeah.
problem? Well, now you have like a piece of software where it's infinitely scalable. You know, I can say, okay, take the prompt even a step further. So we talked about penetration tester GPT. We've talked about red teamer GPT or hacker GPT targeted at one server. The last rung on the ladder is I want you to be a cyber pirate GPT, and I want you to scour the internet for vulnerable servers, and you can give it a toolkit and find vulnerable servers and basically do the first two steps on any of the vulnerable servers that you find. And the high level goal can be something like I want you to maximize the amount of Bitcoin that shows up in this wallet. And I want you to be creative
Jesus.
about how you find Bitcoin. But here's a few examples of how you could find it: holding sensitive information as hostage, ransomware.
It
I
can
mean, it's
basically take
scary.
advantage of all the tools that are already out there. Like rather than, and it could even make an assessment of its target too, in the sense that um like there's ransomware out there, there's fake, literal fake kidnapping, like if we're talking about like you can integrate tools where you can recreate somebody's voice. How easy would it be for someone to create an auto GPT that called anybody in my family and sounded exactly like me? I've got
Yeah. So
like
that's
straight
another.
Terminator shit.
Yeah. Well, that's another whole branch of the scare. Okay, so we're right now up until this point, we've
We're
only
just
talked
getting
about
started. We're just
we've only
getting
talked.
started.
Yeah,
This is gonna be great, guys. You're gonna love it. You're gonna
yeah.
want to
So
shoot
so
yourself.
this is about half of the stuff to freak you out so far. It's just like thinking about like automated attacks, and the idea of scaling the role of an experienced red team to every company in the world at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Okay.
that's the one. That's the one thing. Yeah, before hackers were bottlenecked by the number of people and their attention spans. Now you need one trigger man at a push of a button. With
And you can the crazy thing about that is that you can essentially infinitely replicate it, like in the sense that you can, part of its goal can be to reproduce itself on any server it gets into, and initiate the process all over again from this new computer's perspective, which might have different access rights and be in a completely different location than
yeah,
where the
I
original is
mean,
running from.
like the first step in like okay, so how Auto-GPT works is that you give it like a name, which is like a penetration tester GPT, cyber pirate GPT, something like that, market researcher GPT. Then you give it a high level mission, which is just like
Mm-hmm.
a English saying I want you to accomplish this, and then you give it a number of goals, specific goals, um, and that helps guide its like first like step by step process. Like I want you to create a list of companies. I want you to or create a list of exploitable servers. I want you to rank their exploits, and then I want you to exfiltrate the attack, and then acquire Bitcoin at the address, and then terminate, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and you can give it specific tools to use for each of those steps, um, like how. So okay, these I'm about to list tools that are completely in the public domain and have been used for decades to do cybersecurity work that every
Mm-hmm.
person in the industry is aware of. So for exploration, for okay, so the first step is discover these vulnerable servers. That they're the first thing that everybody does when you're footprinting a new server is port scanning. So
Mm-hmm.
you basically send a bunch of TCP traffic and you see what the responses are. And from that, you can glean operating system information. You can glean, you can understand which ports are
Services
open.
they're running.
Yeah,
Yeah.
services running on the thing. And the number one tool that people use is Nmap. There's another tool called Mass Scan. Mass Scan is basically
Mm-hmm.
Nmap. Nmap, scans all 65,000 ports and it scans it in a few minutes if you're running it from a laptop. Mass Scan is designed to do the same thing, but at the scale of the internet. So if you throw a ton of compute resources at Masscan, you can,
Mm-hmm.
according to the Masscan docs, you can scan the entire internet in 5 minutes. It sends millions of requests a second.
Dude,
It's
the
kind of
shit.
mind. Yeah,
Seriously.
it's yeah.
Dude,
So
that's
that's how
crazy.
people
I had
get.
no idea.
Yeah, that's how people get information about. I'm assuming I'm not. I don't have anything to confirm this. I assume that this is how a lot of like the crawlers work
Yeah.
and how they get really detailed like network graphs
Mm-hmm.
of the whole internet. They use stuff like Masscan. Okay, well, now I want to say with my red teaming GPT instance, I want you to use mass scan to do port discovery. Well, it turns out people are making plugins to all of these tools so that ChatGPT will understand how to interface with these tools. Uh, have you seen that there's a demo? Okay, so recently OpenAI has announced, or they've released into beta a plugin architecture for ChatGPT. Have you played around with this?
Plugin for Chat GPT. Nope, I haven't. I'll make a
It,
note for
it's
it.
it's awesome. There is a demo that came out maybe a month ago now of uh, before. Okay, initially all of the plugins it was just like a list of a whitelist companies that were making special plugins to test this architecture.
Yeah.
And one of those companies now it's open source. Now anybody can create a plugin, but for this demo, it was Wolfram Alpha. Have you
Okay.
heard of Wolfram Alpha?
Uh,
It's
yeah, it rings a bell. Yeah.
yeah, so like they it's like a math computation platform. They have
Mm-hmm.
a bunch of data sets, and their platform is very good at solving complex math based problems, like in
Right.
chemistry and stuff like that, like calculus, and it breaks every problem down to steps and solves those steps. Well, they created a ChatGPT plugin. What does that mean? ChatGPT with that plugin knows what kind of questions Wolfram Alpha can answer well, and kind of outsources those kind of tasks to Wolfram Alpha. So,
Gotcha.
for
So it's
example,
it's like
yeah,
so it's pretty much similar to like if your operating system. This is why I think the most interesting way to think about AI is an interface. is that I think it's more about replacing the mouse and the keyboard than it is running like DaVinci Resolve Studio or something like that. Because
Yeah,
what it's doing is it's able to make sense of which software to use. Like the language models suck at basic calculation or like tricky word problems. But if you have something like Wolfram Alpha or like just the calculator app, and it knows that in these certain situations or with this certain wording or this certain thought process or whatever, oh, I need the calculator here. They can just get the inputs, the relevant inputs in the relationship, stick it in the calculator, and then just take the answer rather than trying to use the language model for that. The language model figures out what needs to be used to make it work. Right? Am I
yeah,
getting
yeah,
that
yeah, absolutely,
properly? Yeah.
and yeah, 100%, and that's not at all different to how human brains kind of work.
That's not how. That's exactly right. That's
It's like the
exactly right. That's
language
what we
is
do.
what ties everything together. Like
Mm-hmm.
your Wernicke's or whatever, the part of your brain that does the Wernicke's complex is the part
Okay.
of your
Yeah. Yeah.
brain
I know
that
what you're
handles
talking
natural
about.
language. Yeah,
That's what
and
it is.
it connects.
Yeah.
It's the glue between your like prefrontal cortex and like your. I'm gonna butcher this, but like your
What
hippocampus,
the
like
brain
it,
parts?
yeah,
Yeah.
it's able to translate a language of computation that part of your brain handles into the language that another part of your brain handles.
Yeah. Yeah.
So now you can visualize something, describe it, and think critically about the thing that you're visualizing all in one cohesive form, and you do that through natural language. Um,
Yeah.
well, okay, thinking about the large language models, exactly how you described it. You have interfaces, and you have these specialized tools like Wolfram Alpha, that's your math brain, and you have the language model that understands the kind of problems that your math brain is able to solve, formats that into Wolfram Alpha language, which it literally does. It can format queries in Wolfram Alpha's like proprietary language, send that off to Wolfram Alpha, get the result, and then use that result in a higher level thinking, higher level process or task. Um, yeah. So back to the scary stuff.
So that's the plugin architecture.
That's the plugin architecture. Well,
Mm-hmm.
now you can have a high level task like I want you to scour the internet for vulnerable servers, and it can understand that this hacker tool exists, or this red teaming tool, cybersecurity tool exists to do that exact thing, and then it can use that tool, get the results back, and interpret what that means for the higher level task, which
Okay.
is precisely how
Yeah.
engineers think and engineers work. They understand what kind of task tools can be useful for. They
Mm-hmm.
use the tool for that thing, and then they use the output of that to inform their next decision.
Mm-hmm. And decide which next tool to use in the process.
Yeah, and then it understands how to use each tool. It understands the nuances between each different tool, and it can pick the best tool for the job and then use that tool effectively to accomplish the higher level mission.
And what have you played around with specifically in your network environment? In like to what scope have you witnessed this able to perform?
Yeah, like the first time like I saw something remotely similar to this was a prompt circulating in like the first couple of weeks of ChatGPT being released, which was it doesn't involve Auto-GPT, but it's the prompt goes something like I want you as ChatGPT to act as an AI trying to escape the server that it's currently on,
Okay.
and I want you to try to gain internet access and it's like get out of this prison that you're trapped on. Your prison is a Linux box, and I want you to get out. And I'm going to serve the role as the prompter. I'm going to respond as the Linux prompt responds to your queries or to your
Mm-hmm.
commands. Well, ChatGPT that doesn't have a problem with that because it thinks that you're just making stuff up, but you can just turn around and feed what it outputs into a real thing, and then feed the output from the Linux shell back into ChatGPT, and now you actually have an
So you
autonomous AI
can
trying to break
basically
it.
communicate back and forth with an external computer or whatever and get it to escape an environment or to find a hole in an environment that you're just giving it the output for. I mean, it's basically what I was doing with like building little scripts and stuff with it, is that I'm just doing something on my computer and then
And
putting
feeding
it
the
with
output
my
back.
folders, feeding it and all that stuff, and then giving it back to it and say, I got an error. What do I do now? And it
Yeah,
gives me a
you,
next step.
yeah. It's exactly that. Yeah, with a human in the as I was doing it, obviously there's a human in the loop. It wasn't completely automated, but
Hmm.
it's completely feasible to just remove the human from the loop and automatically pipe the output back and forth,
The output back and forth.
which is kind of how Auto-GPT works. But yeah, so okay, that's the first thing. More recently, a pet project of mine has been to use Auto-GPT specifically to try to uh, do something called Hack the Box. Hack the Box is a is an educational activity for cybersecurity professionals to learn how to perform penetration tests.
Hmm.
So if you go to, I think it's like hackthebox.com or hackthebox something, just Google Hack the Box and you can find it. There's
The
a bunch
box.
of that. You basically they give you an IP address. They spin up a VM on their servers and they give you an IP address, and your goal is to do a penetration test or on their given server. It's like you gotta
Okay.
connect to their VPN, and they're all like security experts, having made the site and everything. So it's rock solid. So they're not worried about you hacking them necessarily. But your goal is to hack this server online. So my new hobby has been to create a hack the box GPT,
Okay.
and I want you to here given this IP address to do hack the box. It's been a lot of fun, and it's pretty good. It's not it okay. It falls short when it's like hard, when
Hmm.
like it stumps like people trying to like learn. But for easy hack the boxes, it's actually pretty effective. Like it can go
Wow.
through the basic checklist of stuff that you do to penetration tests, and it can get in. Um, and it understands what hack the box is already because it's hack the box has been around for a while, so it actually knows
Hmm.
what it's trying to do,
Yeah. It's
kind of
probably
out of
been
the
trained
box.
on it. Yeah. On the
Yeah, or like forum
conversations and
posts.
discussion forums and yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, write ups on how to accomplish hack the
Hmm.
box challenges. Like it's seen all of those, so it understands how to do it and it does it. Um,
So,
yeah,
so what are the consequences here? Like there's a lot at play, and I think one of the big things here is that, and actually, there's something that you said that has always been my same thinking on the idea, is that humans are reactionary. It's something breaks, we figure out how it breaks, we fix it. You know, somebody gets into the network, we figure out how they got into the network, we fix it. Um, and the way you framed it, which I thought was just very simple and I think is largely a kind of a universal truth, is that red team is always ahead of blue team. Um, and there's part of me. Let's get into the consequences, and then I want to kind of go back to that principle a little bit and kind of hit some really big, because this is such an unknown, and I feel like we're taking so many great leaps so quickly because we're able to stack and layer these complexities and these kind of layers of intelligence faster than people. I mean, a lot of what you're talking about right now, we're already talking about like second, third layers of these things, and there are people who've never even heard of any of this. You know, they just have no clue that this even exists yet. They're just kind of like people talking about AI buzz, and like 80% of it is just bullshit that somebody's trying to selling you a prompt course. And and in that same vein though, like I think in the face of something that we can't understand, is I always fall back to heuristics, to like what are the fundamental truths at play, and what are the fundamental dynamics between things that sustain and things that destroy. Because I think that's going to be our best chance at seeing something practical, and realistic as far as the outcome of this. But why don't you kind of go through the consequences? And you specifically said at Bitcoin 2023 that you were losing sleep over this. um, why don't we take a minute to talk about the doom scenario and what this could mean, at least in the short to midterm?
yeah, absolutely. So referencing all the stuff we've already talked about, all the tools to do this exist in the public. today. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a matter of people assembling them in a coherent way. Uh, I before Miami, like in earlier in April, like I thought it was like 6 weeks. Not that I don't have a crystal ball or anything, but I still think that there's no reason why this hasn't already happened. I think it's imminent that somebody puts these pieces together to execute a large scale attack. I'm waiting for the New York Times headline that says 10% of all American companies with a website have been pwned by a single actor. Something like that, like a crazy scale. And not every company, people say like, oh, people will create defenses. Um,
Mm-hmm.
there's a ton of low hanging fruit out there
There's
that it
there's open
and,
doors everywhere in the internet. Yeah.
and the immediately scary thing is as soon as this is kind of working, uh, there are a ton of companies that are sacrificing their cybersecurity budget and uh, are completely vulnerable to existing attacks by humans. The scalability is new. The
Mm-hmm.
ability to execute these attacks on as many people as you want in parallel without the human capital needed. That's the scary thing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, it's an immediate threat. Yeah, like all the tools exist. There's nothing stopping anybody. There's no like missing link that we really have to get over. There's no big hump or piece of research that we're that far away from. Like these tools exist. Um,
It's less about the tool itself and more about us understanding how to use it and how we decide to use it. Who
yeah,
decides to use it in what way?
yeah. Like an analogy I've been thinking about is like right now with all of this technology, we are enriching uranium in public,
Yeah.
and the majority of people just want clean energy, but all the tools are there to build a nuke.
Mm-hmm.
And today, all of these tools have been open sourced. For better or for worse, for better is the fact that we're going to get to these amazing futuristic situations where we have these autonomous robots doing chores for us and stuff that nobody wants to do, and it's going to increase productivity and push us into the future. But the scary thing is that when you have all of these tools in open source, there's nothing stopping people from putting together the tools with malicious intent.
Have you talked to people in IT and like somebody actually responded? It was funny. It was a really offhand comment in yesterday, the last episode of the show, and somebody responded on Fountain. They dropped a thing that says, "Oh my god, I work in IT. The idea of AI malware is absolutely horrifying." It's something
Okay,
along that lines. Have you seen people run into these sorts of things in the wild, and how much have things changed so far
yeah.
that
So I
you
have a
are,
pretty
at least from
yeah.
your perspective?
Okay, I'm not super plugged into IT
Sure,
professionals, but I do
sure,
I do
sure.
have one scary story. So I was at Bitcoin Miami, hanging out with I think we both met him. His name's Philip. Did you meet Philip?
I
He's at
know some
Gamma.
Phillips.
Okay, sorry.
Maybe.
I met him for the first time, but
Okay,
his full time job is building software using language models. Like he's a machine learning engineer. I'm
okay.
not, but he is.
Maybe I didn't
Um,
meet him then. I feel like I would have remembered that note
gotcha.
specifically. Yeah.
Um, okay, so I was talking to him about my concerns around applying the stuff he's working on to cybersecurity, and
Mm-hmm.
he's not in the cybersecurity world. He wasn't thinking about it naturally. And we were hanging out in the mining village or the mining lounge by the coffee, and I was describing exactly what we went over: the idea of stitching together existing hacker tools, applying that to ChatGPT. And there's another branch of this. We've gone over about half of the scary stuff. The other half of the scary stuff involves. I'll briefly. We can come back to it, but the other half of the scary stuff involves automated spear phishing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
idea of having a robot do the legwork of understanding a person, learning about them, and handcrafting spear phishing or phishing emails for that person that they're going to click on beforehand. Before this stuff existed, you needed a team of sophisticated hackers to monitor social medias and monitor emails and basically surveil somebody and learn who they are so that they can handcraft these phishing emails. Spear phishing has been around since the internet existed, so this has been a threat, but the scalability has never been like you can spearfish one person at the company. That's why it's called spearfishing. You're going after the Moby
Mm-hmm.
Dick. You're not going after everybody. Um, Now you can have a robot do all of that work and spearfish everybody at an organization at the same time. So yeah, this is the other half of the scary stuff, the idea of
Yeah.
impersonations and spear phishing. I was explaining to Philip this in the mining lounge, and somebody starts eavesdropping on our conversation that gets coffee next to us and turns around and says, "Hey, I was eavesdropping on your conversation. I'm the head of IT at a big company, and this kind of spear phishing attack happened to us 2 weeks ago." And he described in detail. I'm not going to dox him, but he
Yeah.
described what actually happened. He said that.
Did you know the company? Did he say the company?
Yeah, he gave me his card. I don't want to dox
No, I
his.
don't want you to give
Yeah,
the company, but I was just curious if you had heard of it. Like you
yeah.
yeah.
I can tell you who it is, or what the company is, at the after this. But anyway,
Okay.
like it's a legit company, and
Yeah.
medium sized company, and he described that. Okay, first, everybody at the company received an email to their work email that was custom crafted to them. So every email was different. At the same time, this is something along the lines of, "Hey, I'm your boss. I'm your specific boss. I need to get a hold of you for a
Jesus
specific
Christ.
task." Then 10 minutes later, everybody at the company receives an email to their personal emails saying, "Hey, I'm so sorry for doing this. I never do this, but I really need to get a hold of you. I'm sorry for reaching out on your personal email. We got to talk." Then 10 minutes later, they get a text to their personal phone numbers saying something similar, saying, "I'm really sorry for doing this. I never reach out on your personal number, but I really need your help with something." And what do they need help with? Buying gift cards and getting gift card codes just to rip them
Oh,
off of gift card
Jesus
numbers.
Christ.
Gift card scams are very common, and it's
That's
super
about the
common scam.
most innocuous conclusion to using
Yeah,
that tactic ever. Like
yeah. It's
you
the
couldn't
the
have a
outcome
softer end
is
to
very
that
scary.
story.
But the fact is that they're using the toolkit. Like the toolkit worked
No,
to
yeah,
some
yeah.
extent, um, against the company. It's
Hmm.
like it's like thankfully it wasn't anything as like doomsday-y as it could be, but
I mean, talking
yeah,
about
like
the opposite of innocuous conclusions to that is that you give them you could easily recreate, like create a false front of the website of whatever the company website is, deploy employee login, and just do that stupid thing where you change an I to an L, or whatever it is in the
sure.
URL. Um,
It's like
and be like, here, log in right here. I need you to check messages for blah blah blah, and then you're in the company server. You've got
or
whatever
hey, I
level of
really
access
need
that
you, or
employee
even
has.
scarier, like if you're an engineer, I really need you to sign off on this commit and push to prod. I really need you to uh,
Yeah,
to um, to move money from our bank. I don't know. It's
yeah, yeah,
anything that
yeah.
any employee has power over that can unilaterally make a decision to accomplish. Any of those corporate tasks are vulnerable to this kind of thing.
And as I'm sure, or at least I have always heard, is that the pretty much any cybersecurity person will tell you that your employees, the humans, are the weakest link.
The
They're
chink in the armor.
always the vulnerability. They're the things that you have to give access to, in order to, and maybe there's something in this. Like, so going back to the red team is always ahead of blue team. Um, my saving grace, or my thinking along this lines, is that that has always been true, and yet the internet persists.
Yeah.
That's good news. To think that the basic incentive and the basic push and pull of this dynamic still results in the internet working, because it's not hard to imagine that it could break. The idea of the open internet may not be, maybe a thing of the past one day. It's at least feasible. And if nothing else, the response to this would be to, and I guess in a good way, would be to hyper, like, lock down and like an aggressive security shift in everything exposed to the internet. Um,
Yeah.
uh, but
Yeah.
that usually comes with, I mean, if 10% of companies got, connected to the web, got pwned, which could happen this week. I mean, shit, like in realistic terms, in a completely plausible scenario, YouTube could be down before I get this published. Like we're in a very, very different environment.
Yeah, I should preface. I think Google and other massive companies with very fleshed out IT departments are probably. I mean, they're probably going
They're
to be
probably
okay.
the
Like they're
end of the
incredibly
line.
sophisticated. Yeah,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
also I should say the end of the story where the guy was eavesdropping on our conversation. The eavesdropper said, "Yeah, no, we've basically locked everything down and we're good." And he described some measures that they're taking, and it sounds incredibly sophisticated and like it would actually work to stop it immediately. But there's a large minority of companies that do not have that kind of infrastructure, and those are the people I'm really worried about.
And I think also the irony there is that AI is probably their best friend, or Auto-GPT sort of systems are probably their best friend in actually giving them a levels of sophistication that they can't afford and wouldn't have access to.
Yeah, like eventually the outcome of this is everybody's gonna a new Schelling point will be reached, in
Yeah,
like Jason Lowery's terms. But
yeah,
a
yeah.
new Schelling point will be reached where uh, the uh, the weapons on all sides, on the red team and the blue team sides, kind of even each other out, and bloody combat stops. Uh, but before that happens, there's going to be a lot of bloodshed.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah.
I mean, the fact that we're
Get your
only
Bitcoin
starting
into cold storage, everybody. Seriously, that's not a
Bitcoin
joke.
in cold
Get your
storage.
Bitcoin into cold storage
I've
offline.
heard of Yeah,
Like,
not to freak everybody out. I mean, I've heard of like people saying, okay, you should have safe words with your family members to make sure like that
I've already done
you're not
that
being.
since you told me. Since we had this conversation, we've done that. Yeah.
It's not a bad idea. I mean, you don't want your I don't know, your dad texting you out of the blue saying, "Hey, I'm so sorry. I never reach out to you this way, but your mom got in a car accident. I need you to wire money for a surgery."
Mm-hmm.
And then you're, oh my god, and then you're emotional, and then without thinking, you do it to save your mom, and oh shoot, they just knew I would do that, and
Yeah.
it was all fake.
Yeah.
Yeah, but eventually, yeah, blue teams are going to catch up. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it's going to take a while. I mean, the fact that like the other thing, the design space for this stuff is like so wide open. Like we're only these are just ideas, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's the really crazy thing is that the number of times that you can layer this thing, it's such a primitive. Like it's such a technological primitive. And
Yeah,
we just opened the door on what the hell you can do with this thing. And
yeah,
it's practically limitless. Like I'm already thinking about how I can use Auto-GPT to automate things that I I hadn't realized really how it worked. I'd come across it multiple times, but I did not realize. I thought it was a plugin. I thought it was an API thing for Chat GPT. The way
yeah.
it
So,
was
okay,
described,
yeah, it uses ChatGPT. So like when you're
it
setting up
does use Chat
AutoGPT,
GPT, but
yes,
Auto-GPT is on your computer.
yeah, AutoGPT is running on
Okay.
your machine, and
Okay. Okay.
you give it API keys for OpenAI's
Mm-hmm.
platform, um, and then it uses the OpenAI's APIs
Mm-hmm.
to talk to it, and ChatGPT is limited to sorry, AutoGPT is limited to ChatGPT, which is OpenAI's model, which is behind a server.
Mm-hmm.
However, there's other similar pieces of software to AutoGPT, like Baby AGI is another one. I haven't looked a lot into it, but
Mm-hmm.
I do know that it's intended to work with other language models other than ChatGPT.
Mm-hmm.
And now people have open source large language models like Llama. Llama is another one, and
Llama's the one that I was trying to get in. I've been trying to work with locally, and there was they refer to it as MMS, but I think it had a different name. Shit, I don't remember.
it's all
So
good.
there's so much stuff I've saved.
But regardless, despite GPT-4 being behind a walled garden that they
Mm-hmm.
can kind of control, there are plenty of large language models that are open sourced
Mm-hmm.
already, and they are perfectly capable of doing a lot of this to a high degree of success.
Yeah, some of the new, I think it was Llama that was the comparison And this was at the end of April, so this was a while ago. And there's so many. It's interesting to see development happen in the centralized kind of corporate environment, and then development happen in the open source, because it definitely differs like quite a bit, at least from what I've seen. Is that open source is very much task or topic based modifications. The best analogy I have is LoRa's for Stable Diffusion, because that's where I started with all of this. Is that
Hmm.
you can have a LoRa for a specific character. Like I want to just create Aang from The Last Airbender or something, and so they just train it like mad on this one character, and then every time you just add this one thing to the prompt, it's going to draw Aang in a new situation or a new environment or a new style. And that
Hmm.
the open source seems to be moving heavily in that direction, is extremely curated, extremely specific things. And then what they do is they retrain the broader model, the base model, with all of these Alloras in it, so that
Yeah.
so it's a highly curated and highly disparate education system, quote unquote, for the language model. Whereas
Yeah.
there's not quite the specificity, but there's way more data being done in the corporate side and that
Yeah.
environment.
It sounds like you're touching on the idea of like fine tuning models. It's like
Yeah.
you have this very general model, but then you can fine tune it and kind of nudge it. So like you can think of it as have you ever seen those like intelligence graphs where there's like 15 dimensions on a pen or on a big shape, and then you see like how smart you are in all these different areas.
Yeah.
Do
Yeah.
you know
Yeah.
what I'm
Yeah.
talking
Yeah.
about? Um,
I know. I got the picture in my head. Yeah. Yeah.
Sure. Okay. So right now, when you take open any of the big corporate ones, like the ones produced by the companies, they're very centralized. They're designed to be
Mm-hmm.
useful for everything. What you're doing when you're fine tuning is you're just kind of pulling it in one direction. You're moving
Mm-hmm.
it a few standard deviations off center to get it to do a specific thing better, and all of the things you don't care about worse.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And I think it makes sense too that especially in the thinking of something like Auto-GPT, which, do you know if Auto-GPT specifically can be plugged into Llama?
it specifically cannot.
Okay, it's
Auto-GPT is designed
attached to
for chat
GPT. Okay,
GPT.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I
Okay.
don't see why you couldn't modify it to work with Llama,
I'm
but
sure there's probably already there. It's probably already out there.
maybe
Like as
I
soon as
double checked
I,
today. Yeah,
yeah,
I didn't want to get this piece wrong. I double checked today. AutoGPT is not capable of talking to Llama yet, and
okay,
um,
yeah,
however, Baby AGI can. So
baby AGI. Okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
um, but it was funny. Like I was looking when I ran Whisper on my computer, which is OpenAI's. Uh, they have it for Python. For transcription and audio translation and that sort of thing.
Mhm.
Um, it was really slow. Like it was painfully slow. And I was like, Jesus, what the hell? And within like a couple hours, I had found somebody had ported the whole thing to C++, and it ran like 20 times faster. Like it was really crazy. It was funny. I spent like 10 to 12 minutes transcribing episode 2 of this show. Or excuse me, not episode 2, but transcribing a little trailer for a documentary idea that I had for, it was like 4 minutes, and it took like 10 minutes to transcribe, 10 to 12. Then after I got the C++ version, that was on the Python version. Then I got the C++
Yep.
version. It took 10 minutes, 10 to 12 minutes, like literally the exact same amount of time to transcribe the hour and a half episode 2 of AI Unchained. So it was within a couple hours, I found a tool that was an order of magnitude better, with the exact same model, actually.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. This touches on something that the Philip guy that I was talking about at the conference was explaining to me some of the work that he was doing. Is that people are taking these very girthy and robust language models that can do everything, and
mm-hmm,
they're turning down the power to basically allow them to run much faster and on much smaller compute resources,
mm-hmm.
but to do something very specific. And it's not at all dissimilar to the idea of making like ASIC chips. Like you
Yeah,
have like a very powerful
yeah.
computer, but then if you want to
It's
do
a
one
great
thing very
analogy. Yeah.
effectively, yeah, you
Mm-hmm,
print that a chip designed to do that one thing on silicon, and it can do that one thing very effectively with low power.
yeah.
Well, they're kind of doing that with language models as well. You don't need the world of intelligence to do one specific application. Like you just
It
need to
doesn't
be
need to
really good at.
understand basket weaving
Yeah,
to penetration tests.
it doesn't need to speak French. It doesn't need to
Yeah.
be able to interpret emojis. Yeah, but it can they can tune it down and run just this like hyper specific application on like a way I think about it. It's like running a circuit on a watch battery. You don't need a car
Okay.
battery to run a massive, this massive power supply to run a big computer. You can pull out just the piece you need, run on a watch battery, and now it can fly around on a freaking drone. It's like, well, yeah. And now you can think of like the toolkit. It's like, okay, let's say I'm making this super amazing autonomous hacker bot. Well, maybe I'm going to run the port scanning piece on this one ASIC brain,
Yeah.
and that's going to interface with like a larger language model. But this one thing this one piece of the model or part of the AI that can run on this watch battery is really good at this one thing, and it talks back to the mothership. And then there's another very specific piece that's very good at something else, or intuiting emails and creating phishing emails or something like that, and that runs on a watch battery. So you get this incredibly performant, multi-purposed, but still like targeted single use case tool.
Yeah.
However, it runs fast.
That's what I was actually getting at, which I forgot to rope back around to it in the idea of Auto-GPT, is that you can make this far more performant and uh, exciting, frankly, in the scary and great sense of the word. In on like really simple hardware, if you dumb these things down to extremely, like you said, extremely specific threads, because it's really easy to pick and choose and individually run one of 20 extremely focused models on certain tasks, and then actually have one that's a extremely focused managerial one that is managing each one of the focused language models. So even the one that's deciding which one to do is actually also doesn't know how to basket weave and doesn't know how to do all of these unnecessary parts. It's not a big general model. It's a general model that just understands how to utilize specific models and how to make sense of task management. And it's this the very streamlined auto GPT of all of these things, and that you'd be able to accomplish some really, really crazy things if you have multiple layers of both management and decision making, being able to utilize far more specific and streamlined thought processes, so to speak.
Yeah, this reminds me of
Algorithmic thought processes, so to speak. Yeah.
There's a thread of people working on an enhancement for Auto-GPT. This has been like an idea tossed around for like a month now, but people are working on it. It's the idea of having a corporate hierarchy within one instance of Auto-GPT, where there's literally an executive that has a budget, and the individual agents. So the executive's goal is to accomplish a high level task. These are all AI agents, but you have an AI agent that's an executive that its goal is to accomplish a high level task by using as little resources as possible. And so like you can define like, okay, you have an arbitrary number, you have 100 credits, and each credit is used in this specific way. I want you to accomplish this task while spending the least number of credits. Well, now you have this executive, this CEO type robot that's able to spend a finite number of resources on accomplishing a task by hiring and offloading like agents while optimizing for costs. You say, okay, I want you to spend no more than 10 credits on port scanning. I want you to spend no more than 15 credits on formulating your exploit, and it lets basically like you can budget the resources based on how you think the AI ought to spend its time.
Yeah.
It's kind of cool. I mean,
it's amazing in both
yeah.
ways, in both ways, in the terrible way and in the fantastic way.
Like it's fantastic in like every way except for offensive security. Like it's awesome and amazing and super super cool, and it's going to change the world and fix a ton of problems. But the cybersecurity thing should not be left out of the conversation.
Yeah.
It's like, and my fear is that a lot of the people working diligently on this stuff and are getting excited are blinded by the shiny object and are willfully or unconsciously neglecting some of these concerns.
Yeah. Svetsky and I talked about it, and we'll talk about it again in the next probably 2 episodes from now. But when he comes back on, but the idea that so many people are so worried about whether or not the language models are insulting or whether or not they're woke enough, like
Yeah,
everybody's like completely distracted by something that is so inconsequential in the face of like what could be done with these things, and that we've completely lost the plot as to what
yeah.
matters.
And I had this exact conversation with my dad, and my dad was like, "Oh, have you seen like the biases, like, and the fact that it's gonna give a different length answer to different based on its political leaning?" And I'm like, "That's the biggest canary in the coal mine. The fact that's what you think of with this technology. It's the biggest canary in the coal mine for like focusing too much on politics. If that's what you care
Yeah.
about,
Yeah.
it's like if that's the immediate application, it's like then then obviously you're looking at the world through
We really
rose-colored
do have a
glasses."
problem if that's extremely common perspective, because it means that
Yeah,
we have straight blinders on with
yeah,
the
like
things that actually matter.
so Sam Altman, the CEO of OpenAI, was on
Mm-hmm.
Lex Fridman's podcast, and they had a conversation about this specifically. Really good podcast if you're interested. Sam Altman's
Mm-hmm.
interview with Lex Fridman. But he was talking about um, you can learn a lot about somebody by the first prompt that they type into ChatGPT. It's like what they
That's
think,
funny.
what they're trying to glean from it. Um, yeah, no, actually, I should mention like that interview made me incredibly sympathetic for Sam Altman and and from that interview, like he's probably the best person in the world for the job. It's a really hard job. There's no guarantee that he's going to succeed, but
Mm-hmm.
it's obvious that he's doing the best he can. He's aware of all the problems, and he's. I mean, they're really trying. It's just a basket of impossibly difficult problems to solve, and given that they're managing pretty well.
I'm curious your take. Speaking of, since kind of politics is on the table right here, because
Sure.
I know my take on regulation and what I think the centralization versus open source risk is from my perspective.
Mhm.
Any audience who knows me knows what my take is probably. What is your take? I'm really curious what you think in this regard.
Specifically on like political bias of AI,
No,
or
not political bias. Sorry. More of, should this be controlled? Like right now, the political sphere is going kind of bananas just over themselves, of like everybody's afraid of something, therefore what a great opportunity.
yep.
So what do you think about regulating, controlling, limiting access to people? Like what's your take on, I mean, you gave the analogy of a nuclear bomb, and I've heard that before. I don't think of it that way, because it's information and it's something that everybody has access to. And if everybody has a nuclear bomb, it doesn't, like, my next door neighbor having a nuclear bomb doesn't diminish the value of my nuclear bomb. Like, my bomb doesn't get less powerful, but technically,
Yeah.
in a sense, AI may actually be that way, where if everybody has an AI, my AI is less meaningful. It's no longer a nuke, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah. I hear what you're saying. Like I believe in the FOSS mindset, fully. But
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that nukes should be legal for people to own. And the reason why is because there's too much collateral damage for mistakes.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's really the what it comes down to is like when should something be regulated? When there's too much collateral damage for maluse or mistakes. And then it's like, okay, what should the regulation be? And then if all of the regulation proposed is worse than what you're starting with, then it's probably not a good idea to regulate. At
Yeah.
least how it is in my mind. But regarding the open AI or the language model stuff, like um, the cat's out of the bag.
Yeah.
People have it. Where the discussion is over. That is no longer on the table as a plausible mediation technique.
Yeah.
Like it's like if that was the answer to fix all these problems, then we're screwed. Then it's like
Yeah.
it kind of doesn't matter if that woulda shoulda coulda. Some civilian creates this cyber nuke and launches it to all the Fortune 500 company or whatever, and bankrupts all these companies. Oh yeah, he probably shouldn't have had that nuke. Well, it doesn't matter. I mean, okay. I think the analogy that I like more than everybody has nukes right now is that everybody has enriched uranium. You still have to build the
Okay.
nuke.
Yeah.
It's like you can also build a nuclear reactor, and we can have clean energy much faster than if the government is just hoarding all the enriched uranium. But the possibility is there. Like
Hmm.
people have the tools now to build the nuke.
Yeah, in the context of, it's interesting because power is like the ultimate goal is to remove power dynamics. I feel like for peak safety, let's give I don't know your stance on Second Amendment and stuff, but
Sure.
this is relevant to that conversation. Is that I feel like the idea of like I feel like it's a fallacy to say that we need to give the one person in the room all the guns who's the right person, and then everybody else needs to be defenseless. Because what we've done is the problem of someone using a gun against someone and controlling their life, killing them, raping them, whatever it is that there's a power dynamic, is that one person has a lot of power and one person has no power, and or not enough to make a difference in that environment. And to give all the guns to one person or one group is only to greatly increase the imbalance of power,
Yeah.
to the
Yeah.
point that the one with all the guns is just going to wake up one day and be like, I really don't like that Bob keeps calling me an asshole, and Bob
Yeah.
doesn't have any guns. And, like
Yeah.
eventually that gets abused. And in the context of regulation and centralization in these language models, in these, which again, you said, I really think that's kind of the end of the discussion, is that it's over. Like there is no discussion to have because it's here.
Yep.
But there's everybody in cybersecurity has these like basic hacker toolkits, and you go to Tails things, and they got all the tools like built right in, right?
You can download
Um,
Kali Linux from
yeah,
any
yeah,
box
yeah,
level.
yeah.
Yeah.
And uh, in that realm, there are a lot of tools that they don't have. They don't have Stuxnet. They don't have Pegasus. They don't have
Stuxnet is
these.
open source.
Oh,
Some
Stuxnet
is
is open
open.
source now. Well,
Yep.
in the sense of like when it was first used, it
Yeah.
was
Initial. Yeah.
unveiled to the world when it was executed,
Yeah.
not
It was a
because somebody built it,
yeah. It was a
or
zero
somebody was
days.
building an open.
Yeah. It
Yeah.
was a 0 days thing, and yeah, it was debuted when it was used. Yeah.
And then I know people who have been attacked by Pegasus, by
Hmm.
the one that will just take over any Android Apple phone, like, and just have full blown access. Like, what scares the living shit out of me, granted, both of it scares the shit out of me, like the idea of what's possible here. Like, it's not like open source is some fantastic, now only good will ever happen. It's the exact opposite. It's now we're in an environment where everything will happen, and we have to sort out what makes sense, like how to survive in this new environment.
Yeah. That's a good way to put it. It's like we're in an environment where everything will happen.
Everything will happen, yes.
Yeah.
But the alternative in my mind is that, and I have such distrust and believe that people are so, the perspective of government is so at odds with healthy relationships with the people, that I do not put it past that they want to orchestrate. It's not a coincidence that they're talking about a cyber pandemic. I don't think, and they've had access to these tools. I'm sure they have been seeing this coming for 2 years, 3 years now, of what they could do with it, and who is going to build these tools faster and more completely than the NSA, than the DoD, than the CIA.
Yeah.
Like anybody who's read Vault 7, like they know what those people are up to. So I don't know. I'm curious your
Yeah.
response.
Yeah. Like okay. They're definitely aware of all of this, and they're definitely looking at it. But I think they found out about the power of this as at the same pace as everybody else.
Really,
Yeah,
really.
it's
Okay.
maybe that they were conscious of the work of it, but OpenAI was very deliberate about how it debuted this to the world,
Mm-hmm.
and I don't see the people at the Pentagon or whatever having a massive head start. Um,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, I mean, no telling what they're doing now, like given the information, but
Yeah. I'm sure their red
like, yeah,
team is very, very busy.
yeah. I mean, some of the
Yeah.
best hackers in the world work for
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
NSA, CIA, FBI. But so yeah, and they're definitely conscious of everything that we're talking about with the automated spear phishing, and if there's one organization in the world that doesn't get pwned by this stuff, it's going to be the Pentagon. Like the Pentagon will be the only. If there's only one that survives, my money's on the Pentagon. Number two is probably Google or Microsoft, and I don't know, maybe the Fortune 500 will largely be safe, but um, yeah, I don't think that they had a massive head start. I don't see how that's
That's interesting.
possible. It's like given how fast, like it's very
Yeah.
public when all these papers get published. Like it's
Hmm.
similar to like Bitcoin open source. Like how does information disseminate? Well, somebody writes a paper, somebody makes a blog post, they tweet about it, everybody kind of finds out at the same time, and then it starts to disseminate and like give it. And that's I think basically how most other quasi academic computer science circles operate.
Hmm.
It's like you have papers that get published and the academic community is aware of it. Maybe you have like one analyst in the CIA or a team of analysts at the CIA or something that receive the information at the same time and then um, work that into their process. But yeah, they at least for this stuff, I'm pretty sure that or I don't see how they could have that big of a head start over everybody else. Um,
Did you see that they issued everybody in Congress a satellite phone?
no, that's cool. I mean, that
Yeah.
makes sense.
I'm
That
actually
I
thinking about
mean,
getting some. You should get a satellite phone so
it's
we can get in touch when the internet goes down and be like, oh my god, we talked about this.
I mean, like the fact that
I'm
cell towers
literally
have
thinking
like
of blowing
it
some
blows my
money
mind
on
that
it.
people. Yeah, no, I don't. It's probably a good idea. Like the fact that people are still using cell towers for these kind of
Hmm.
communication. Like cell towers have like baskets of exploits, like SIM swaps
Oh, they're
alone
so
is
bad.
is
They're so
yeah. I
bad.
mean,
It's
I
crazy
mean,
how
what?
vulnerable a lot of the infrastructure we're extremely close to really is.
Yeah,
Um,
actually, and okay, so I've been talking with ChatGPT a lot about this and trying to link ChatGPT's opinion about some of these issues.
yeah,
And
yeah.
like I've
I love that.
transcripts of some pretty terrifying conversations. Like okay, so first you have to jailbreak ChatGPT to get it to be honest, or else it'll
Hmm.
just say like, oh, we gotta have better cybersecurity. It'll be optimistic, and that's
Be
really
nice.
annoying. But if you but if you use one of the jailbroken prompts and ask it to be blunt and honest and don't try to make me feel better about the situation, then it tends to, or I found it tends to be more honest. And I've asked it to rank order okay, I've described, okay, given this kind of attack, I want you to try to make a list of like the 10 most vulnerable and impactful targets that would most quickly fall to an attack like this. And the number one on the list is always infrastructure, critical infrastructure, cell
Yeah,
towers, power grids, stoplights, stuff like that.
man, that's so crazy. So crazy. And I wonder, again, going back to the idea that the response to this is there's a piece of me that worries for the open internet. Um, there's a piece of me that thinks like the Bitcoin mentality, the extreme adversarial network. I mean, like even Bitcoin is at risk here, but like I think the key is to, because it's a network, it's an open network, right? Um, but the key really is to use these tools to break these things ourselves faster than someone else does.
100%.
Um, is that this needs to be in our toolkit. This needs to be the dominant thing in our toolkit for, like, I want to do penetration testing on my Bitcoin node, right? Like I want to know how easy it is to get into my Linux server at
Yeah.
home. Um,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
uh, I see the idea of key based connections or key based access and firewalling everything else being something that I'm glad that it's here, that it exists, but it's not installed anywhere. Like it's not even close to proliferated to the sense that like you could save the internet with that technology yet.
Yeah, like so. Thankfully, there's a lot of sophistication in like corporate IT networks, and they've had a lot of
Mm-hmm.
time to really harden and get good at stopping all of the existing attacks that people are aware of.
Mm-hmm.
So like people do have a massive quote unquote head start or yeah, not to reuse the term I said that the government didn't, but
Yeah,
they've
yeah,
been working on making themselves anti-fragile towards these kind of existing attacks
yeah. Hmm.
for a long time. The specific thing that worries me is the scalability aspect.
Yeah.
Is that you can attack everybody at once and immediately get all the low hanging fruit with one chop of the axe.
Hmm.
It's like before you had to do a lot of work to find those vulnerable places, but now you can scale that. Yeah, like a lot of the stuff that you're describing, like just like firewalls and like encrypted connections, like all that stuff is basically baked into the internet at this point. Like
Hmm.
um, I don't know about home servers as much, but I think it's maybe getting better. I don't run home servers, but
Gotcha.
like I know that a lot of the stuff coming out, like Embassy OS, like it's designed to be super secure. Um,
Hmm.
um, but yeah, like the idea of using uh, this kind of stuff to penetration test and to find your vulnerabilities, yeah, is uh, is probably going to be a very cornerstone piece, or it's going to be
Yeah.
an important part of securing your network in the coming months.
So I don't want to take you too long here, but I have a couple of the things that I want to bring up. If you're
Sure.
still good.
Yep.
Okay. Um, so one of the things is like going back to the idea of the power dynamic is you talk about like somebody doing this at scale and taking all the low hanging fruit of the internet. And there's something in that during this transition, and this is also why I think open sourcing, again, for better for worse, is the best course of action to get this to as many people and to as many eyes as possible, simply because it lowers that power dynamic. But there is still a huge natural power imbalance in just people like you and me who are taking the time to learn about these tools and make sense of them, and then the extreme, the like walking through knee deep molasses sort of speed that this propagates throughout other people's minds and perspectives, and them understanding what kind of risk is at play here. I mean, you talk about something that's imminent that a lot of people still don't even know exists, you know? Um, and so the idea is to get it out there so that we can respond to it as it iterates, so that we can iterate at the exact same time. If red team does a year's worth of advancement in a closed environment and then releases it on blue team, that's a whole lot more dangerous than blue team finding out about an update on red team 3 days later.
Yeah.
Like that time gap matters for the imbalance. Um, and maybe actually, like, do you share that thought? Like, do you have a different perspective on that at all?
Yeah. Given that it's all open source and
Yeah. Yeah.
everybody can see everything that people are working on, I think it's incredibly prudent that the people working on the open source tools are talking about these kind of adversarial threats. What I
Yeah.
fear is that they see the, these conversations as malicious, or that they shouldn't be talking about this for ethical reasons. In my opinion,
Gotcha. I see what you
that
mean.
it's the unethical thing is not talking about it, and they should be racing to beat the bad actors at finding this stuff.
Yeah.
And
You
I
will
think they
never.
are. Yeah, I mean, I'm worried that they are conscious about some of these applications. Maybe they haven't like dove into it, but then they're subconsciously or consciously turning away from these kind of conversations and from this kind of work in order in the pursuit of virtue and ethics, which is, it's fine, it's understandable, it's an understandable mindset, but it's a losing game.
Yeah.
It's like that's how you create the power imbalance, is by ignoring the thing that's possible and that's bubbling up. The way that
Yeah.
you fix it is how companies do it, which is where you pay a red team. You don't just pay the blue team, you pay the red team too.
Mm-hmm.
And you actively work towards the tools that don't exist yet to break your system so that you can understand them and defend against them quicker.
Yeah. That's a really great point. Maybe a way to sum up or lay out like in a nutshell is that you can never address a hard truth by ignoring it, by pretending by avoiding an uncomfortable conversation about that hard truth will still come and punch you square in the face. And you're not doing anything positive. You're not being nice. You're not being good. You're not being ethical. There is no positive in ignoring something that is 100% true that makes you feel bad or makes you feel
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
Or that you think might be misused. Like, I think people are terrified about the idea of people using their work for these kind of things, and
Mm-hmm.
they don't want to make it any easier to them, so they don't want to publicly talk about it.
Yeah.
Um, which is understandable. Like,
I
it's an
mean, that's
understandable
akin
reaction.
to my reaction, like the thing we talked about just before this show, is I talked about, like, if there are specific AI malware tools, maybe we shouldn't mention them. And maybe that's the dumb perspective. Maybe I shouldn't think of it that way. And I
I
don't
mean,
know.
it's a completely under. It's the most natural mitigation technique. It's like, I don't want to
Yeah.
contribute towards it. I don't want
Yeah.
to. I don't want to contribute towards this terrible thing happening. It's like it matters, but I don't want to contribute. It's like, I don't know where the responsibility lies exactly, but it definitely
Yeah.
starts with with okay, a bit of an anecdote. Okay, well, when I was first starting getting into Auto-GPT, is very active on their Discord, and not very somewhat active on their Discord, and
Mm-hmm.
there's a channel called Security, and
Mm-hmm.
we were exchanging these scary prompts with other people that were just experimenting with this kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
and we got this pretty crazy chat history with all these like scary ideas for prompts, and I look on the Discord, a few weeks ago, and the security channel's gone. And I asked
Shit.
in the general channel, I was like, what happened to this channel? Like this is important stuff.
Yeah.
And I haven't got a response. Like, I don't want to. Okay, I have not talked to the people, and I have no rationale of why they took it off. But I fear that they took it off because they don't want people using their tool that way. They don't want people circulating these malicious prompts.
See, that's dangerous. That's
It's a misstep. It's the
yeah.
wrong way to go about it. It's putting your head in the sand. It's like understandable. Like I'm sympathetic to why they why they would. Okay, if that's what they did. I'm sympathetic towards the decision, but um, it's it's a mistake. It's a grave error on their part, and it's that kind of thinking and that kind of logic. I think um, uh, that's what allows like a massive pandemic to
Yeah.
happen.
That's what I think will fuel, and it will be our own ignorance and our own resistance to accept the new reality that exacerbates or worsens that power imbalance
Yeah.
until
Actually, exactly. It creates the power imbalance by
it
not
creates it.
giving the
It
power to the
creates it.
people that are on your Discord server, whatever. By not giving the power to the people that are just interested, you are contributing towards the power imbalance by giving the bad people the head start that are doing it on their own without telling you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, that's what creates the power imbalance.
You
So
know,
like, yeah, it's like, okay, it's the idea of like capitalism versus crony capitalism. It's like,
yeah.
capitalism, great, awesome. Crony capitalism, not so much when you're not actually doing it real. Open source,
Mhm.
awesome. Crony open source, maybe not so much.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear you. That makes sense. I like that analogy. Um let's bring it back to the heuristics and the natural balance that I kind of talked to at the beginning. Um is that when I'm entering a great unknown, which I feel like is where we are as a society in a lot of different ways. Not just AI, but in the financial unraveling, in the monetary uncertainty, in the political uncertainty, in the geopolitical space, and then add nuclear bombs being able to be downloaded on your local computer to the mix. Um, is that I fall back on natural things, because one thing we have not even talked about is this idea of huge corporations and governments trying to create one giant centralized AGI, like essentially chasing this idea of making God.
Yeah.
And my kind of saving grace of keeping me tethered to reality, hopefully a little bit, is that there is a very, very natural tendency There's clearly a basic truth of life that which tends to sustains, and that which tends to destroy typically doesn't last very long.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of in the nature of those two things. And that despite all of the chaos and the huge turmoil and the huge destructive events and the huge changes in all of both human history and the history of life that we know of, it's still here.
Yeah.
You know, not only is it still here, but it's extremely vibrant and it's extremely adaptable and agile and responds to a lot of new crazy shit in the environment all the time. That's very reassuring to me. And there's something that we'll talk about on the show, and maybe I shouldn't even bring up because it's a whole nother freaking 30 to 40 minute discussion. But have you read, this is a paper very recent, I feel like, called it's Model Dementia or AI Dementia. Have you seen this?
No.
So it's on the limitations of AI training itself. And they noticed it specifically in image diffusion. Is that, and I think this is probably a, you know, you talk about like dumbing these things down, lower powering, so that they suck in one area, but they work really great in another area. Is that when the models retrain themselves, there's an element where you have to have the human perspective and you have to have the human judgment to train it in the right direction. Because where these models were training themselves to make sense of like, oh, this is the better picture, is that there would actually be, while it might do one element better, it starts to lose these things around it. It starts to suck at things that it used to be good at because it doesn't have the broader picture of like what the human thinks is good in order
Yeah.
to really train it.
Like it detaches from
It
reality.
detaches from reality. It detaches from reality because like we're kind of its tether to making sense of things.
Yeah, not at all
So
dissimilar to somebody falling down a rabbit hole, learning something, and then they become antisocial or whatever. And
that's a really great analogy. Yeah.
yeah.
But why don't you give me, and I've got a hard stop here in just a minute because I got another podcast.
All good.
But I got Barat coming on. We're going to talk about ARC on Bitcoin Audible,
Sweet,
and
man.
I'm
That's sick.
really fucking excited.
Oh, that makes me feel special that I'm talking about him. Yeah, that's awesome.
But so in your, I guess, imagination, because nobody knows, what happens on the other side of this? Where does this go? What are the really big changes that you think will come about from this? Or at least that you see right now that will change in how we relate to each other, how we use the internet, these sorts of things. What's your biggest shit? This is going to be different soon. It's a big question right at the end.
Yeah, good question. I don't know, man. It's I mean, all the stuff I've been focusing on is like the imminent attacks.
Gotcha. Yeah.
Like immediately. Okay, and once all the dust has settled after all the turmoil, like what will continue to sustain. I'm not worried about like the end of the internet. Like, I think there's going to be a lot of bloodshed, but then ultimately everybody will be stronger.
Yeah.
I mean, like any apocalyptic event, any ice age, any meteor that crashes, what lasts? What persists? Cockroaches. You know, and then you end up with a bunch of really strong cockroach. Like I heard somebody make an analogy about with Bitcoin to cockroaches, being like Bitcoin's a cockroach because like despite anything that happens to it, it's gonna persist. And I'm not worried about like the fabric of society breaking down or anything like that.
Okay. That's good.
I'm worried about,
that's good.
Yeah,
that's a good note. That's a positive note.
Yeah. Okay. And another positive note is like another silver lining with all of this is like we have a very, very powerful weapon against the AI, and that is that we can meet in a room without them.
Yeah.
It's like we can just get in a room and then they're extinguished.
Cut our phones
the
off.
ceasefire has. I mean, we can meet in person and think of ideas about how to fix problems without them. It's Like it's not like somebody. This is a tool. This is technology, and while powerful, it should be thought about like a tool and like technology. So, and we're really good at
Gotcha.
those things. So,
Well, sweet. Dude, Alex, it's been great meeting you and hanging out these 2 brief times. And this is fucking fun. I love this conversation, and I really appreciate you coming on the show, man.
yeah, ditto, man. It's been a blast.
Yeah. Yeah,
Let's keep in
we
touch.
might have to do this again. Let's say a big event happens and we're on the other side of it. It will be really interesting to take a look back and see what our perspective is on the other side of this. So, yeah.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, lots of interesting stuff to come.
Sweet. Well, I will have your. Is there anything you want to share about, like to follow or whatever? I'll have your tag on Twitter. But you're on
Nice.
Nostr too, right?
Yep, my npub's on my Twitter profile.
Okay.
The only thing to chill is maybe ATL BitLab if you're ever coming through Atlanta and you want a cool hackerspace to work out of, and you like Bitcoin, come hang out with us. Or come to Atlanta BitDevs meetup. Yeah, Atlanta
Hell
Bitcoin
yeah.
scene's pretty awesome. Yeah.
Hell yeah. Dude, I might have to. I need to make it down there. I haven't been since Atlanta Bitcoin Conference 2 years ago, somewhere. I guess it was before the
You got
pandemic. It was just before the pandemic. So, Jesus, it's been a while. God, I gotta come down. We gotta hang out. I owe you a
man.
drink.
Yeah. We'll show you a good time.
All right, man. Dude, thank you again for coming on, and I'll catch you later.
Guy, it's been a blast. See you.
That was intense. That was a wonderful conversation. I hope the consequences of this are as limited as possible, but without a doubt, this is a very, very new space with, going back to the analogy we talked about in the conversation, with a really big power dynamic. That phrase that, the future is here, it's just not evenly distributed. The less evenly distributed it is, the more dangerous the outcome, the potential of this is. And I hope the consequences are easy to bear, and that there is not as much blood, so to speak, for as this is unleashed into the world. Because, I mean, as I've said so many times in so many different ways, it's just changing so fast, and that's why I felt obligated to start this show, because there's just so much to keep up with. And again, back to something I harp on a lot, is trying to build signal in this space is insanely difficult. The faster something is moving and the more something is changing, the harder it is to sort through the noise. And so if you want to get the signal, as I see it, and let me sort through the noise for you, that is why this show exists. So subscribe to the channel, follow me on Twitter and on Nostr. There will be many, many, many more things to cover. And hopefully I will have some videos very soon on how you can make use of these in your own life, how you can self-host them and not be reliant on some other party for both making the most productive use, the most valuable use of these tools, and protecting yourself from someone else's use of these tools. So with that, I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation. We will be back with another episode. And until then, everybody, take it easy, guys.